podcast starts.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the podcast where mostly we talk about horror. Sometimes we talk about other things, and sometimes we swear. This is TD Velasquez, but as ever you can call me Dan. Now, today's going to be one of those episodes where we're talking about something other than horror again. It's a follow-up to our discussion about the Star Wars movies and specifically Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee's involvement in them a few episodes back. I thought it'd be nice for us to have an update chat about the movies in the series that have been made since we had that first discussion back in 2017. And although Howard was unable to join us for the discussion, I was able to recall Sean Mason and also bring in one of our other favourite occasional guests, Spider Dan of the Spider Dan and the Secret Wars podcast. So what we're going to do in today's discussion is mainly discuss the Star Wars movies released since our previous recording. Specifically, that is 2017's The Last Jedi, written and directed by Rian Johnson, a rather controversial and somewhat tragic movie, as it did feature Carrie Fisher's last performance on screen, as she died after the movie finished shooting, but before it was released. Just a few months later, a movie was released called Solo, A Star Wars Story, a movie which told the backstory of the character of Han Solo, played in the main Star Wars movies by Harrison Ford, but in this prequel film, portrayed by the young actor Aaron Ehrenreich, and it was written by Jonathan and Lawrence Kasdan and originally directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who were replaced during shooting by Ron Howard. That's a movie I've never seen actually, but Sean and Dan have plenty to say about it. And then in 2019 we had the final movie in what's become known as the Skywalker Saga, The Rise of Skywalker, which was written by Chris Terrio and J.J. Abrams and directed by J.J. Abrams, another movie which was divisive among fans and audiences in a number of ways, which we'll get into. Early in the discussion though, we do start by talking about the one Star Wars movie featuring Christopher Lee, which I hadn't seen at the time of our previous recording. This was 2008's animated movie Star Wars The Clone Wars, directed by Dave Filoni and based on a story by George Lucas and a number of other writers. All of these movies are of course based on characters and concepts originally created by George Lucas, and all of these movies are in fact now available to view on Disney Plus, the streaming service, which didn't even exist at the time of our previous recording. So that's where the discussion's going to start. We didn't have time to take in the many developments in the Star Wars universe that have happened on television and on streaming since our previous recording. Maybe we'll come back to that in future. This discussion is really just about the movies that were released. Oh, just a quick note, as I record this, we've got COVID in the house, and actually when we recorded the main discussion a few weeks ago, Sean had COVID. I'm not saying that he gave it to us, it can be transmitted down a Zoom link as far as I'm aware. However, if anybody tells you that COVID is over, well, it isn't. It's just much more manageable. Okay, so let's go back in time a few weeks and join Sean and Spider Dan to talk all things recent Star Wars. So, we are very lucky once again to have the marvellous Sean Mason with us. Hello, Sean.
Hello there, as Obi-Wan would say.
Beautiful, sir. And also, just to mark about how different time was when we recorded before, in 2017, there wasn't even a Spider Dan and the Secret Wars podcast.
There was not.
The dark times they were.
Thank you very much.
But therefore, who better to step in now and be our third panellist than Spider Dan himself? Hello, sir, and welcome back to And Now the Podcast Starts. It's always a pleasure.
Yes. It's been a while since the Black Cat, I think, that we did a while back. Yes, thank you for having me. And I love spending time with Sean. Sean's been on my podcast, you've been on my podcast. And it feels like coming back home again to a nice, cozy family. Not unlike a certain holiday special I covered on the podcast not so long ago.
That'll be interesting. I've still never had the guts to watch the Star Wars Holiday Special. And obviously something that's happened since we recorded before is COVID itself. In fact, without COVID, I would arguably not ever have started a proper podcast, because it was only the lockdown which made me and Kirsty and Stella have the time to actually launch it properly. And sadly, Sean, you're suffering right now, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I've managed to somehow get it again, which is, I started the year with it. I'm ending the year with it. The bit in the middle was fine. It's very mild. I'm vaccinated and all that stuff, and been very lucky, really.
Okay, so let's rewind then to the end of our earlier discussion. So, obviously it was a boom moment for the Lee Cushing podcast and Star Wars, in that Rogue One had just been released. Peter Cushing had been digitally resurrected. I wonder if that will ever happen again. We talked a bit about, obviously the discussion was focused on the Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing contributions to Star Wars, including the bit I hadn't seen at the time, which was the Clone Wars animated movie, which Christopher Lee is a voice in.
Kidnapped. Jabba the Hutt's son has been. Negotiate the treaty with Jabba. Obi-Wan will. Find the renegades that hold Jabba's son. Your mission will be Skywalker.
Soon the Jedi will not only be at war with you, Count, but the Hutt clan as well.
Good. Everything is going as planned.
They have nowhere to run.
Fall back! You're in trouble!
I've now watched that, thanks to Disney Plus. Isn't it great to have everything in one place? Yeah, that's a thing that exists. I'm glad it does. But it's like the non-authentic voice actors, who basically everybody in the film, apart from Christopher Lee and Samuel L. Jackson, they're all fine. So I think on this trailer said Samuel L. Jackson and Christopher Lee didn't get the memo that they didn't have to turn up to this one. And I kind of thought, yeah, everybody's really good. They really didn't need to be there. Because you don't notice that none of the other voices are not the original people, really. Yeah, like, the Anakin voice is arguably better than Hayden Christensen was at the time, for instance. I still haven't watched the whole series, though.
Oh, do. It gets so good. The early stuff, yeah, is probably aimed a little younger, but it genuinely gets really good, particularly a couple of seasons in. And the last, when they went back and did the unfinished episodes for Disney Plus, there's some fantastic Star Wars storytelling in there, and some really quite dark. It is well worth checking out.
When you say the unfinished episodes, what does that mean?
So Clone Wars was in production before the Disney buyout, and it sort of finished mid-season. No, it finished on season 5, but they'd started production on another season, half of which was finished, and that got released on Blu-ray everywhere but the UK, which was really annoying. But then those episodes were released on Disney Plus. But other story arcs that were quite important, and particularly finished off the Ahsoka Tano character arc, they went back and they completed the big unfinished story arcs and released those as well. and they're really, really good.
I must say, I want to watch them because we've now got, sadly for me, my main feeling about all modern Star Wars, good and bad, I enjoy different parts of it, is, okay, so we've now entered the post-Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee era, but of course the animated series do have Darth Sidious, they do have Tarkin appearing. Is Tarkin in Rebels?
Tarkin's in Rebels, yeah.
Yeah, so I do want to watch those to enjoy those characters and get a hint of those worlds. I think we will talk going forward about the kind of actors and characters that more modern Star Wars has started to bring in to kind of fill the gap left by the passing of that generation of British thesps, which were very much a part of the fabric of the whole thing to me, and it's in a different space now.
I think Tarkin's also in the Bad Batch. I can't remember.
Oh,
he's certainly going to turn up if he hasn't already.
Right. Okay. So, just for my understanding, the Clone Wars show is obviously set between episode 2 and 3. Is that right?
Yes,
correct.
And then Rebels, is that set between 3 and 4? Where does that come in?
It's about a year before A New Hope. Well, it certainly starts, it kind of builds, it almost goes up to Rogue One. It's kind of happening at the same time. There's some crossover with some of the plot threads that would lead into Rogue One as well. So,
okay.
That's, and whilst also, like Dave Filoni is kind of the heir to the George Lucas bit, really, because he was heir's the wrong word. Kind of like he was kind of the protege of George.
Yeah, well,
so
he
there's a
wrote
lot of
and
connected
directed
storytelling.
The Clone Wars series, didn't he? And then went on. Obviously, he's been very much involved in the writing of The Mandalorian and kind of going forward. And he's become beloved by the fans, I think. Although the Clone Wars, certainly the movie, were not very well received originally, but now he's considered a very trusted, holder of the canon, I guess.
I think I might have said this when we talked all those years ago in the last part of this podcast. I just don't think the Clone Wars maybe should have been released as a film, because it's a bunch of pilot episodes stitched together.
Yeah.
It set an expectation, I think, that maybe was unfair on it, so it wasn't being judged on its own merits. And also, it kind of was... Obviously, there had been the droids and the Ewoks cartoons, but nothing to this extent, I think, had really been... as an extended piece of storytelling tying directly into the films hadn't really been attempted before. Those, like the droids and the Ewoks cartoons, are very much their own thing, really. So I think it just had a weight of expectation, but that it couldn't match. But it developed and it built, and it is lovely stuff.
Oh, nice. I feel like in a way it's tempting to stick talking about this side of the canon because of the enthusiasm which I'm getting from you guys, but we do have to consider some of the more controversial movies that came out following our last podcast. Shortly, just a few months or weeks, maybe even after we recorded, Last Jedi came out, which of course was the most universally beloved movie of all time. I think. Or I might be getting mixed up with Paddington 2. But anyway, here's a movie from 2017.
When I found you, I saw raw, untamed power. And beyond that, something truly special.
Something inside me
has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
I've seen this raw strength only once before. It didn't scare me enough then. It does now.
Let the past die. Kill it. If you have to. That's the only way to become what you were meant to be.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down. Come on! This is not going to go the way you think. Fulfill your destiny.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Sean, The Last Jedi, it is it's an understatement to say that it polarised fans. I was myself polarised. I felt it tore me in two. I really liked quite a lot of it, but the things in it I found daft. Where did you come on The Last Jedi?
I was one of those people who was very much a fan of it. I thought it was a movie that picked apart Star Wars, but loved it. Like, I think a lot of people were put off by the "let the past die" and all that stuff in the trailer, and it's like people have forgotten that if a character says something at the start of a film, characters can change, and it might not be how they fit. It's like everyone was instantly took a feeling of it, and they decided they were going to love it or hate it before they went in, and instead of actually judging on its own merits. Obviously, I know it's not true of everyone, but I think broadly, like the way and I'm very aware that we're doing a podcast and we're contributing to that discourse. But it got so toxic, I think, because the internet has created this world where people were making their fan theory videos, and if it didn't exactly match what they expected, it was somehow bad storytelling. And it's like, no, just let them tell the story they want to tell. And yeah, no, I really liked it. I think it all works for me. I know that not everyone agrees.
Yes, well, I hear what you're saying, Sean, and don't worry. Even though we are open to critical thoughts here, I have no desire to add to the kind of the broiling hatred that you can get from any corner of the internet. There's more than enough of that in the world. So reasonable, intelligent, and warm takes are what it's all about. I really enjoyed that movie. I saw it twice at the cinema. That's how much I enjoyed it. You know, I don't do that with very many films. I do think it was kind of madly flawed. It's like, I think it's kind of, it became a cliche to talk about how it subverted expectations, which it did, and to some extent that was good. But then it took a number of things too far. Like, for instance, I thought it was good and all right, a reasonable idea to do a movie about, you know, the rebellion on the run, really being overwhelmed and not doing very well. That's what happened in The Empire Strikes Back, and that was fantastic. On the other hand, having the rebellion kind of losing to the extent that by the end of the movie there's one ship with about 40 people on it left. And that's the entire rebellion. I thought, yeah, it might be going a bit far. I don't know how they're going to come back from this. And how they came back is, of course, something that we all found out a couple of years later. What did you think of the movie, Dan?
Controversially, I loved it.
Okay.
I agree very much with Sean. You were absolutely right. It subverted expectations. But the second she goes to hand that lightsaber to Luke, and he casually tosses it over his shoulder, I was excited because I didn't know what was coming next, and there was a lot of those, like you were saying, there was a lot of those sequences in the film where it's like, oh, we're supposed to think this and we're supposed to believe that, and you're absolutely right with the fan theories. My friend Dan Keatis says sometimes you can get in your own way of enjoying a film. People went in with expectations about Batman versus Superman, and that's just not the film that they made or wanted to make. What you have in your head, the idea you have in your head, is not necessarily what is going to be on screen. And I think that line says a lot. Let the past die. It almost is like they're saying it about the franchise, like we're new and cool. But I didn't read that line as that in the trailer. I just read it as that he wants to become Darth Vader, and to do that he needs to kill off his family, kill off that part of him, that side of him. I loved it. I think my main problems with it are is it Canto Bight, or the gambling casino? That sequence just didn't make any sense, didn't lead to anything. And the other sequence, probably the spaceship just slightly being too far away from them to catch up. I thought that was maybe a bit of a leap. But I really enjoyed, again, I like that Rey comes from nobody. She's not every Jedi has to be blood related to some other Jedi. I'd never liked that idea. It doesn't make any sense to me. They're not mutants or something. They're, and the boy with the broom at the end, I like that because it implies that, again, you don't have to be related to the Force. Is this whether it's midichlorians or whether it's this unknown, energy or whatever you want to call it, phenomena. It means that anybody can be a Jedi, and I like that message that anybody could be the hero. It doesn't matter if you're the lowliest person in the world, a kid slave, sweeping this floor. You can still ascend and be special within this galaxy, within somewhere far away. I think the lightsaber battles were incredible, especially that scene with Rey and Snoke and all the kind of Imperial guards. I thought that was great. It has a lot of twists and turns. A lot of people have an issue with Leia doing the Superman thing. I didn't. I
don't either.
Yeah, I think that's within a Force. It's within a Force user's ability to move things. So why can't they move themselves? I have more issues. I will say I have more issues with the following film.
Well, we'll get to that.
Don't worry. We will.
That will be interesting in the light of your comments. I'm glad that we are broadly positive on it. I mean, we don't have time to get into deep details, but I just want to say that one of the major sticking points that a lot of haters had was the treatment of Luke Skywalker in the movie. I thought that was great. I don't really know what the blue milk thing was, but apart from that, the characterization of the embittered, hermit version of Luke Skywalker, and the way that he kind of gradually relearns his position within the Force and within the universe, and the appearance of Yoda, and the incredible lightsaber fight at the end that isn't a lightsaber fight. I mean, where it's all an illusion. I thought that was wonderful, and it was brilliantly done. And it has that magical scene where Luke and Leia meet up at the end, which they were thinking about cutting because Carrie Fisher sadly died by then, so they thought, should we restructure the movie to make the ship explode and she dies? But then they realised, no, but if we do that, we'd have to lose the Luke and Leia scene, and it's a fantastic moment. Yes. Yeah.
I will say this as well, Dan. Sorry.
Go on.
Yeah,
Dan.
sorry, Dan. To interrupt you, I meant to say earlier, when I went to see The Last Jedi, it's not very often I feel like this, but it felt like an event. It felt like a big deal. I don't know why. There was something about it, something in the air that night, or something about the film, but it felt like an event. It was like when I went to see, the new, latest Spider-Man film, or Infinity War or Endgame. It was like this is an event. This is a cultural event. And yeah, I don't know why I felt that way, but I came out of that. I enjoyed it, and yeah, that's how I felt at the time.
No, I agree with you. It felt large. I think it was because The Force Awakens was an event, but it was just Star Wars waking up, so to speak. Whereas this movie was, right, what are we going to do with it? And where's it going to go? And also The Last Jedi, there's just the title, there's something in there that makes you want to know exactly what it means. It felt huge to me. Before we move on to The Rise of Skywalker, we're not even going to go. The next movie would be Solo, of course. But before we move on to that, is there anything else, Sean, you'd like to say about Last Jedi before we do?
Yeah. I think you've both kind of touched on why I think The Last Jedi is great. I think it's a story about legacy and living up to that legacy, of being, and the expectation of being a hero. And if you've messed up, and I think Luke was only ever going to do that because he's only ever learned from Yoda and Ben, when you mess up, you go into exile, right? It's what you do. And that feeling that he'd let everyone down, and that beautiful bit where he does turn up to inspire people is really lovely. And then, because that's what the story is about, it's about hope and about standing up to fight. So actually I think the fact that the Resistance is so devastated by the end is exciting, because it was also talking about like political stuff that was happening and how we can be quite apathetic about it until it's too late, right? And that's what the prequels were about. The prequels were about basically how we've got ourselves into the situation that we're in as a species now, politically.
I was literally talking about it today, and I was like, George Lucas hates George Bush. And all that. You could boil it down to that, the prequels, basically, if you wanted to. But they've always like a lot of people are like, get your politics out of Star Wars. Shut up.
It's literally about fighting fascism, and has been from day one.
Yeah, exactly.
But and just to go back to, like, you're talking about Broom Boy, as he's I think referred to. We've all been that kid. And anything that's like a stick, we've all pretended was a lightsaber. And I thought that was lovely. It was like, because that's what these films are. They should inspire us to go out and have adventures on whatever scale that means to you. I actually thought it was lovely. I love the fact that it did leave it in a way that it could go anywhere. And then The Rise of Skywalker, which I like, but I don't love.
Well, we'll get to that. So the next movie in the Star Wars universe that arrived in cinemas will be much easier to talk about, because it wasn't as controversial, and also I haven't actually ever been bothered to watch it. It is Solo, a Star Wars story.
You're after something. Is it revenge? Money? Or is it something else? You look good. A little rough around the edges, but good.
Heard about a job. Big shot gangster putting together a crew.
I'm a driver, and I'm a flyer. I waited a long time for a shot like this. What do you think? Well, what do you know?
You got a line on a ship?
Yeah, I know a guy. He's the best smuggler around.
I heard a story about you. I was wondering if it's true. Everything you've heard about me is true.
L3!
Let go of the mean man's face.
Who are these guys? If you come with us, you're in this life for good.
You might want to buckle up, baby.
Here they come! Let me give you some advice. Assume everyone will betray you, and you will never be disappointed.
I got a really good feeling about this.
Since when do you know how to fly?
190 years old? You look great.
Push it! So glad we took this job!
What did you think of that movie, Sean? Always struck me as kind of pointless, the adventures of young Han Solo not being Harrison Ford.
I was one of those people who was a bit cold on it when it was announced. I was like, do I need this film? But actually, it's fun. It's a romp. It's got some nice character development in it. There's a lot of fan service. There's a lot of references to Legends lore.
All right.
I think Alden, I can't pronounce his name.
Alden Ehrenreich, I think.
Yeah, but I thought he did a great job.
Okay.
Donald Glover's great as Lando.
Yes.
It's fun. If what I said about it at the time was, if The Last Jedi is a nutritious 5-course meal that gave you lots to think about, Solo was like eating cake for breakfast. Both are great fun, but you can't do one or the other all the time, right? So yeah, I enjoyed it. It. It's very
that's good to
rewatchable.
hear, actually. Oh, okay. So you've enjoyed it multiple times.
Yeah, I think because it's not like I love Rogue One, but it leads directly into A New Hope, so you want to watch A New Hope straight away. This was the one that felt like an actual standalone Star Wars film in a way that Rogue One doesn't like. It is, but it isn't really, because it leads directly into the next film.
Yeah,
but it feels very standalone, and and therefore you can just kind of pop it on. I liked it.
Dan, you were making some approving noises while Sean was speaking. I guess you agree, broadly.
I think it's. I heard about things. There was a lot of trouble on set. They replaced the directors. There's a lot of issues apparently with tone. I saw it on Disney Plus. I didn't go out to see it at the cinema. But yeah, again, I kind of think it's fine. It doesn't offend my sensibilities. I will say some of the kind of the Easter egg stuff. I don't need to know how Han Solo got his dice, because I never noticed them in the original film. So I don't know why we have to learn that particular bit of lore. It doesn't mean anything, because I didn't know it was a thing. So, but people make a big deal about it. I'm like, right, okay. I did quite enjoy the idea of Phoebe Waller-Bridge as this droid who is literally trying to liberate droids because they're treated like slaves, effectively. And it was quite humorous, but I kind of also kind of enjoyed that, and I like that they're kind of poking fun at the universe and addressing things as well. I think Lando in it is great. I think he was perfect casting, and I think he's a great actor anyway, a great musician, and yeah, I think it's fun. There's, I'll be honest, I'm struggling to remember a lot of it. Not in a bad way. But
whole castle run is brilliant.
Yes, that's what I wanted to mention.
It's what, like a 20-30 minute sequence where they go to castle and you actually see the castle run happen. And John Powell's score is brilliant. He uses John Williams' themes sparingly, but like like John Williams came in, wrote a theme for Han. John Powell uses it in lots of different variations and created loads of character themes. And then there's this bit where the score cue is called Reminiscence Therapy, where it's like a Star Wars best of, where during the castle run, all these, like the Death Star escape music comes in and the asteroid escape. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful. It's just fun, exciting sequence, and the score is really good.
Right. Okay. I love that because the John Williams music is one of the defining things about Star Wars to me. And obviously, now that we've moved beyond him writing everything, it's very interesting the choices that are being made in the different Star Wars properties musically. And John Powell, I seem to remember he scored John Woo's Face Off many years ago, and I remember finding that a muscular score. I don't think I've seen anything else that he did.
Oh, that is a great score.
Okay, cool. Well, that's the most invigorated I've ever been made to feel about the prospect of watching Solo. So, thank you very much for that.
And again, you know, everyone's mileage varies.
What?
But it was fun.
Yeah. What I'd say about it is, it's kind of like within the MCU. It's like an Ant-Man. It's It's really like an Ant-Man because it's
a palate cleanser.
It's a palate cleanser. It's a one-off. It's fun. It's frivolous. Yes, it adds a little bit more to the kind of the story, the lore, the galaxy, the continuity. But again, you can enjoy it. Just pop it on a Sunday evening, and you can enjoy it just on its own.
Great. Actually, that is how I like my Star Wars is best, on a Sunday evening. So that's the right kind of vibe, so I like that. And before we go on to talk about the next movie, then, you know, obviously Solo, A Star Wars Story, was the last Star Wars story movie, which I thought was a shame. I mean, I know they're now mining the different story potential within the kind of existing continuity, mainly as TV shows with differing degrees of success. But I did think there was lots of potential to just dig out exciting movies from between the bits that we know, the existing movies. I really desperately wanted them to do a movie set after The Empire Strikes Back that would carry on that feel of a universe on the edge of doom, you know, because that's what Empire builds. And then Jedi, which is lovable in all kinds of ways, just unfortunately for me, takes that feel away straight away. And I think it would be nice to have a movie which was about some rebels who are not, you know, Luke and Leia and friends, who are maybe not doing too well. And also you could have appearances from Darth Vader and the Emperor, who are at their most powerful and unstoppable in Empire. So that's a really fertile area for terrifying and exciting adventure stories, I think. So I thought it was a shame that you know, we only really got 2 Star Wars story movies. because when Rogue One came out, I was enthused with the possibilities of what they might do next, and they've kind of chosen a different approach by putting it mostly into TV shows. Sean, did you think the Star Wars story movies were a potentially good idea? Would you have liked to have seen more of them?
Absolutely, I'd have loved to have seen more. I think what they've learned, and they've learned this kind of recently, is to stop announcing things until it's actually in production. And the problem that the sequel trilogy and the two standalone movies that we got so far have is they are so tied into the release dates. It had to be done by this point on this schedule. And that's when you run into troubles, because you don't have time to tell the story properly, right? So I'm glad that they are taking a bit of a step back on the films and using the time to get those stories right. I'm really excited about the prospect of a Rogue Squadron movie, because I love those books and those comics from the Legends and continuity, and I sincerely hope it still happens. I do know someone who works within Lucasfilm, and they don't know what the status is at the moment. The majority is this focus on TV, and I think the reason for that is the deadlines aren't. They've been given the time to develop the shows and release them when they're ready. And obviously Disney Plus wants content turning over, and it wants regular content, but they didn't rush into it. You know, Andor Season 2 has only just started production. They said we're not going to do the same series this time next year. There will be a year-long wait, and they took the time to develop it, and I think that's what they're doing with the films now. So I think we will get more a Star Wars story films, for lack of a better moniker for them. But I will be patient for them, and I think enjoy them all the more for it.
Very well said, man.
It's an instinct. A feeling. The Force brought us together. We're not alone. Good people will fight if we lead them.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
But I do.
Long have I waited. And now you're coming together. Is your undoing.
What are you doing there, 3PO?
Taking one last look, sir, at my friends.
Confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi. Your destiny. The Force will be with you.
the next, and indeed as it stands, final Star Wars movie that came out at the end of 2019, The Rise of Skywalker. So, you gentlemen, after your effusions about The Last Jedi, how did you feel about... Actually, before we get into that, let's just remind ourselves of the context that this movie was made in. So The Last Jedi had come out and been hugely divisive. Fans, or people calling themselves fans, had been very critical of specific elements of the movie. The man who'd been hired to write and direct, or co-write and direct the follow-up, was suddenly fired. And that was Colin Trevorrow, the Jurassic World Helmer. And he was replaced very late in the day by J.J. Abrams, who had directed The Force Awakens. And Abrams had the challenge ahead of him of, firstly, completely writing a new script, because they didn't like Trevorrow's script, in a short time to meet that release date. But also, his lead actress had died, 2 years before. And so, Carrie Fisher very tragically passed away before The Last Jedi even came out. And at the end of that movie, Leia is the only one of the three main legacy characters, I guess, of Han, Luke and Leia from the original trilogy, still alive, but the actual actress had passed away. So Abrams and his co-writer Chris Terrio are presented with crafting a story that will please this massively divided and antagonistic fandom who want totally different things from the trilogy, and also finding a way to give a satisfying end to the story of Leia without having the option of filming any new footage of her. And it was known before the movie came out that they had found some footage that had been shot for The Force Awakens with Carrie Fisher, but not used. So they kind of recontextualised that footage and repurposed it for the new film. And it was this... I remember feeling kind of intrigued, hugely intrigued, like, what are they going to pull out of this nightmare scenario? And then going along and watching the movie. We'll start with you, Sean. How did you feel when you saw The Rise of Skywalker?
I ended up going to see The Rise of Skywalker in the cinema twice. The first time, I liked it, but the same time had issues with it. And so I went again to see it without that weight of expectation. It's like, I know what this film is now, and I want to go and watch it again and meet it on its own terms, as opposed to anything that I've built up about it. And I did like it more. It's not my favourite Star Wars film, because they had all those challenges. I think they do a good job with the hand that they were dealt. And I think there is a lot to love in it. I think the third act actually is really good. I think from, other than the debate about how it works, from Han's ghost turning up to the end, I think is actually a really solid film. And I think it works, and they managed to tie things together, and it was fun. I just think it actually needed to be longer, and I'm sure that the people who hated it will be listening to this going, please no. But I think there's story moments in it that, had they just taken a bit more time to let them breathe, and because it is so breathless in that first hour, it is jumping all over the place.
Yeah.
with all this mystery box plotting that J.J. Abrams is so famous for. But once it actually focuses, I think it works. But they did have so many things to overcome. When I saw it the second time, last little anecdote. In front of me was a dad and his two kids, his two sons. And to the right of me was a proper anorak. Now, we are all nerds here. We are all nerds and we can talk about this stuff all day. But this was one of those proper trousers up to here kind of everything released after 1977 is rubbish kind of nerds.
Right.
And when the credits rolled, this guy just kind of went and just walked out.
Right.
The dad and his sons were taking selfies of the screen because they'd watched it together. And I remember like watching A New Hope in the cinema with my dad, the special editions, because I was born just after that Star Wars wave had crested, and until the special editions, obviously like there'd been the Thrawn trilogy novels and interest was starting to pick up again, but until the special editions, I'd never seen Star Wars. So I have a lot of love for the special editions. Has all of it aged well? No. Were all of the changes amazing? No. But there's also a lot of good stuff in that version of the film. And it was my first Star Wars. And it's a generation. I remember watching it with my dad in the cinema. I remember when my parents split up, they both took me to see The Phantom Menace because they wanted to share that with me. So to see that, I was like... Because I was also the right age for the prequels. Do I have problems with The Rise of Skywalker or the overall arc of the sequel trilogy? Yes. Is there a lot to love? Yeah. And I think there's also a whole generation that's going to grow up saying this was their Star Wars. And they're going to love it. So, where do I sit on it? He says, having rambled on for 4 or 5 minutes. It's one of those films that has so many great pieces that they don't all gel. But I don't hate it. I think it works. I just wish those circumstances, as you explained before, Dan, hadn't limited them. And they hadn't been so tied into hitting that Christmas release date. They'd had more time. I wish they'd just had more time.
Sean, I remember I was talking, I think it was off mic when we did the previous podcast, and we were discussing the fact that Carrie Fisher died, and you said, I'm very sad about the fact that I don't think we're ever going to see Leia holding a lightsaber now. And then that scene happens in The Rise of Skywalker.
That was great. Yeah, I loved that. I was so excited.
I think that's kind of symbolic about I think that's kind of typical of what the film does. I really enjoy it. I think all the things in it are kind of right. I think I'm really glad that the last Star Wars film has it has Mark Hamill and it has Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher. They're all in it. Yeah, not together, not in the way that we might have ideally wanted, but they are all there. There's loads of the things in it are lovely. I love the fact that the Emperor comes back in it, even though it makes no sense. But
it does, right? A load of people always pick on that somehow Palpatine returned line.
Right.
But kind of what else was he going to say? But then it's also is explained. It's the Sith history guys like cloning, dark science, all of those things pre-existed within Star Wars lore. And really, it's basically sort of an adaptation of Dark Empire, the 90s comic, right? It had already kind of been done. I don't remember anyone complaining about Dark Empire at the time.
Okay.
But maybe that's because I don't know, we just like to see our heroes kick ass. But that brought back Boba Fett, it brought back the Emperor, clone empires. It had Luke turning to the dark side in that comic, you know.
I haven't read it, but I did hear an audio adaptation of it. Yes, like you said, and I think that the things in The Rise of Skywalker, a lot of the ones that I find unpalatable, it's because they've not had time to breathe, or they've not been set up ideally. So I want Sidious to come back. It was maybe the way they explained it or didn't that kind of rankled with me.
Yeah, but then do you want a film to stop for 10 minutes and do a here's the science slideshow? It's like, does it matter how it happened? It happened. That's the important thing.
Yeah, but what I'd ideally like, Sean, is if the previous films had kind of set up that might have been on its way.
That's fair.
Yeah, I agree.
And also, like, you know, the character of Snoke, you know, they never even give us a line to explain the relationship between, you know, you can infer things about cloning and stuff, but they don't have time to go into it. But if we'd known who Snoke was in the first place, it might have been easier to kind of link those things together. What were you going to say, Dan?
Well, I was going to say it was explained, but in a very unusual place. It was explained within the video game Fortnite.
Oh, yes!
I'd forgotten about that, yeah.
Don't worry, I remembered. So all that kind of dark history and the cloning and stuff, and Sean's absolutely right, that is in the comics. It does happen, he does clone his bodies and various other things. But I think my main issue is J.J. Abrams, after all the films came out, he went, yeah, I never really had a plan. And I'm like... Right. Force Awakens is fine, but it is a bit of a rehash of New Hope. I did kind of like, I was like, for the first like half of that film, I was like, I know we're not here to discuss that, but I was like, right, get to the new stuff, new characters, new places, new adventures, new, you know, technological marvel. Show me the new stuff. And towards the end, it did start going in that way. With this, my biggest problem is that the first 30 minutes of the film is a retcon of the previous film.
Yes.
So we learn that Palpatine's alive and Snoke was a clone. We learn that Rey was not the daughter of nobodies. You know, basically everything that the fans hated about the previous film, they went, oh, look.
Some of the fans.
Okay, sorry.
Some of the fans.
Okay.
And also, a Jedi's weapon deserves more respect.
Yeah, a subset of the fans, let's say, whatever. So the let's say the loudest and most obnoxious part of the fandom, maybe.
Yeah,
and the potentially misogynistic part of the fan base and the racist part of the fan base. Don't forget.
I have real problems with sidelining the characters, like
yes, that is
real problem.
That as well. Yeah. That's I think that was a very that was another one of the retcons I forgot. That's a good point. That was a big deal to me. Because she wasn't supported with her issues. Disney seemed to only be doing that now, taking a stand with all the racism and stuff, which I think is shocking. They didn't take a stand earlier. I don't know why, but but anyway, for me that was the most annoying thing. Those choices that they made in the previous film, they should have stuck with. They should not have bowed to the fan complaints. They should have gone, no, that's the story, that's canon. We've got to roll with that. That has been done. We can't reverse it. Carry on. I would have respected that more, but the fact that they went back on almost everything, the decisions they make and the storytelling, it just irked me. Again, I don't hate this film. I don't think it's the, you know, you see the type of films I cover on my podcast. It's certainly not the worst film I've ever seen. But the worst things, I don't know how that kind of dagger works, you know, in regards to the Death Star falling.
There's lots of MacGuffins. I mean, it has led to some exciting extra stuff. Like, The Mandalorian is is already kind of touching on, because they have this lovely gap now where they can fill in some of the backstories. So the Mandalorian has already started touching on Empire's secret cloning facilities and stuff like that. And Adam Christopher's Shadow of the Sith novel also fills in some gaps, and that's fine. What's just occurred to me is it's the Spider-Man 3 of Star Wars. Like, Spider-Man 3 has individually has some really good bits in it, but because they decided the fans wanted Venom, basically, and I say this as a fan, never listen to the fans. The only time that's ever worked out is when they redesigned Sonic.
Right.
Yeah, fair point.
Because that first Sonic was awful, right? But just tell the story that you set out to tell, instead of trying to kowtow to... Because that's the thing about the prequels, right? Love them or hate them, George Lucas set out to tell that story, and he told the story that he wanted to tell. And the only thing that he really listened to the audience on was he sidelined Jar Jar, right? That. But otherwise, he told the story he wanted to tell, and he did have a plan. And I think that is the problem with the prequels is, the sequels is, don't listen to the fans. Certainly don't listen to the people who do go on and make 12-hour YouTube videos about how this should have happened. It's like... And again, I'm aware that this is discourse and we're all part of this thing. But, it's just set out and tell the story that you wanted to, as opposed to what impossible expectations.
They knew they were going to make 3 films. At least a rough outline, at the bare minimum, a rough outline of kind of where it was going to go. I'm sure there's going to be edits and changes and alterations and things, but if you just say, this is pretty set for the most part, and then follow that, and then other directors can come in and alter or change and adjust, but like, come on, like, it's a multi-million-dollar franchise with a lot of love and a lot of care and attention that needs to go into it. And you don't think, oh, maybe we should I don't know, think about it before we, go ahead. I remember I felt bad for John Boyega as well, because I think he's a great actor. I think he had an interesting character in the first one. There's stuff I really like about Finn himself, and this whole film he's like, Ray, I really need to talk to you. Ray, I really need to talk to you. I've got something to tell you. I need to tell you this. It's so important. Stop doing what you're doing. I need to tell you this. And he never does. And I was like, what is so important? And they never address it. Never say. I'm like, and I was either right. It's one of 2 things. 3 things. He's either in love with her. He's either Force user, which I would just be like, I imagine that conversation would go, oh, I'm Force sensitive. Great. And the only other thing I could think it would be was that he was gay. Because they make it out to be something that is personal and sensitive to him, and there'd been a lot of fan discussion about a potential gay moment or a gay kiss in the film, which again people were like rah, 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 about. And some people have shipped Finn and Poe together. Yeah, and that's fine, and that would have been interesting. I could kind of see that happening in a sense, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think there should be gay content in Star Wars, LGBTQ plus content in Star Wars, and
we are getting that now. We are getting
absolutely,
that, which is great. It feels like there were lessons learned with the sequels, and one was don't rush. 2 was tell the story that you want and trust the filmmakers. Again, that hasn't always happened. I think some of the TV shows have also had some issues with that. But and also tell and represent more diverse characters. And there is an LGBT, there's a background character, but it's like it should have been more front and center. Really, it's that kind of lip service underdone. Just do it.
Sean, I want to ask you something. It will be kind of our closing thought, because I'm aware that we're kind of coming to the end of our time. But I just want to ask you, because I sense that you are possibly the most keyed in to the production history of the recent movies. Is it now an acknowledged truth then that they did not have a plan when they were making the sequel trilogy of where the story would go? Because I seem to remember, at least in early publicity, they were talking about the first film will be J.J. Abrams kind of just setting out, bringing back the characters and setting up the universe. But then, I'm sure at one point Rian Johnson was announced to not just be writing and directing The Last Jedi, but also writing the third one, so he would kind of know where it was going. But then that all seemed to change. Was any of that true? Do you know what the real case was?
My understanding is that that production schedule was just too tight. That there was no way that Rian Johnson could have done the third one straight off the bat, because he would have had to been making it during at the same time.
Right, okay.
Because Rian Johnson was writing The Force Awakens. No, sorry, it was writing The Last Jedi whilst they were making The Force Awakens. And I believe he had just said, can you just get to this point? This is literally
right
what he needed. And I've seen, because they leaked, well, someone leaked the treatment or some of the script for the Colin Trevorrow version, which was going to be called Duel of the Fates.
Nice.
Which would have been a fun title. To be honest, it also doesn't. Some elements from Trevorrow's story kind of still exist in The Rise of Skywalker, but apparently there was also he was going to set up Rey and Poe and a lot of stuff that people that wouldn't have worked. So yeah, I don't think they necessarily had, other than maybe some broad ideas, as tight a plan as they probably should have. I think they probably needed a Kevin Feige kind of overseer, which is kind of what Dave Filoni is for not all of the TV stuff, but for a chunk of the TV stuff. He's kind of got his own little part of the universe, and is kind of pretty camped out in that now. But yeah, it wasn't, as far as I'm aware, not as planned out as it probably should have been. Obviously, there were things they couldn't predict, like Carrie Fisher sadly passing away. At the point where, because the third film was always going to be Carrie's film. That first one was Han's film. Second one was Luke's film. That was going to be Leia's film, and sadly, I think that's where the plan was, and I think that's when the plan fell apart. Was when Carrie passed, and they kind of had to abandon what they had been setting up, because they'd kind of then got themselves into this corner they couldn't get out of.
Yeah, bit of a nightmare. But you are right to point out the great things that are in those movies, and this discussion has made me want to go back and watch them again more than I thought I would. I did really like Force Awakens. I did really like The Last Jedi. I thought both of them were flawed, but I liked them. I quite liked The Rise of Skywalker, but I kind of thought it left me with a sense that it was all pointless, wasn't it? So therefore I'll just pretend those films didn't exist. But on the other hand, they have created a large kind of lacunae within the Star Wars universe of what the hell happened in those 30 years between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. What happened, and therefore, shall we tell stories about that? And they seem to be fruitfully exploiting that. I think as my final note, then, I will go back to, the whole inspiration for this podcast in the first place, which was that those actors in Star Wars, Lee and Cushing, and the kind of actors who appear. I feel like something a bit frustrating about the sequel trilogy, one of the number of frustrations, was that it took them 3 movies to realise that they really need arch, semi-camp, veteran British actors playing villains, and of course they did bring Rich D. Grant, and that's wonderful, but I so wish he'd been in all 3 films.
And don't forget Aid Edmondson. In The Last Jedi.
I mean, I love the fact that he was in it, but I do kind of think, yeah, he's a great actor, and I was glad he was there, but also he's not quite from the same area of tradition, of the same tradition of British acting that people like Cushing, Lee, and Julian Glover were. But
I mean, it makes some sense because he was Eddie Hitler, so it makes sense that he would become a fascist. So,
but also that generation, that era of kind of British character actors doesn't exist in the same way anymore. I don't think we have, because we don't have rep theatre, we don't have these sort of names that do turn up in those parts. And if they do, it's not that they don't. I think like Fiona Shaw in Andor kind of is filling that role. And
I think this is my quick response to that is I think that we're getting that generation back because we've now had Doctor Who for 15 years, and that produces those kind of actors. But before that, there was a gap of 15 years with no Doctor Who. So, British actors did sitcoms and soap operas, and everything kind of died away. But now we are building a tradition of British fantasy and British horror movies again, out of which wonderful people are like that. Why is Mark Gatiss not in any of these movies, for instance? But I think in Andor particularly, you do see a lot of those kind of actors who have a feel for the genre. And Anton Lesser, for instance, as well, who's, mainly known for playing crusty police chiefs and things. But, the first thing I ever saw him in was playing an alien in Jed Mercurio's Invasion Earth in the late 90s. So, there are people with the right kind of history. It's just taken the Star Wars producers a few years to get the taste back, to know what to look for, I think, and we're getting there now, I hope. But I do feel very sad that David Warner passed away this year without ever having appeared in Star Wars in any form. I think it might be the only genre label that he didn't appear in.
No, he did. He was in an animation, wasn't he? I'm going to do a quick Google because I remember having the exact same thought. No, sorry. He was in a video game. He did the voice of an Imperial general in Star Wars Force Commando, which sadly is no longer canon. So there is that. But it was a Star Wars strategy game. Because I remember when he passed going, it is mad that he was never in Star Wars. But he did do some voice acting for Star Wars. And if you Google that game, you can hear him in the cutscenes that are on YouTube.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah.
Well, I'm going to do that. Maybe we can repurpose that audio and put it in a movie somewhere.
We'll discuss your insubordination.
I love bringing actors back from the dead in bizarre and faintly distasteful ways, to be honest. So
You mean like Peter Cushing in Rogue One?
That's essentially my jam. Which brings us full circle. Guys, we've overrun. We've had far too much fun. We could go on for forever, frankly, on this topic, and I hope we will get the chance once again to indulge ourselves. But it has been wonderful. Sean, thank you so much for
Always a
coming
pleasure.
and rejoining us for this. Spider Dan, bless you, sir, for being part of this as well. And yes, let's all get back together and discuss the whole new era of Star Wars on TV that came with the advent of Disney Plus, which we haven't even really been able to touch upon this time. But at least we've now got to the point where we actually have covered every single Star Wars movie on this
Yes,
podcast.
thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm no replacement for Howard in any way, but I am glad I was here, and it's been a lot of fun. And I love Star Wars, even the stuff I'm critical of. It still has a special place in my heart.
Wonderful, gentlemen. You're both men of good taste and excellence. Listener, I hope you've enjoyed this discussion of Star Wars, recorded across 6 years. We'll be back with something similar soon.
You have been listening to And Now the Podcast Starts. Produced and released by Ambidextrous Solutions Limited. Presented by T.D. Velasquez. With special guests Sean Mason and Spider Dan. Special thanks to Greg Hume for our original theme music and to Brian Gorman for our original artwork. All dialogue and music clips from films, TV shows, and trailers are used for the purposes of criticism in the spirit of fair dealing as defined in UK law and fair use as defined in US law. No copyright infringement is intended. Please visit our home on the web, www.andnowpodcast.com, for more content and contact details. Or visit our Facebook pages at AndNowPod or at Lee Cushing Pod. Follow us on Twitter at AndNowPodcast or at Lee Cushing Podcast. If you'd like to donate to us, please visit patreon.com/AndNowPodcast. And now, the podcast stops.